Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is the next fantastic installment from the wonderful mind of Jack LaFountain. As ever, please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR? And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled Bayou Moon. Chapter 5. Let's get straight into that. Landry's third cup of coffee eased the throb in his right temple, allowing a glimmer of the bright sunshine outside his window to creep into his disposition. He had fallen into bed the night before, exhausted by 2 days with minimal sleep and unable to let go of the nagging image of the footprint in the flower bed. His sleep had been fitful and sporadic, but without dreams of dying old men, doctors and howling wolves. He called the office to say he would not make the usual 8 o'clock appearance. He threw together some grits and bacon for breakfast, and after the second cup of coffee, tackled the dishes in the sink. The book lay open on the table as he settled in front of it for the third cup. His eyes still felt like they were packed with a pound of sand, and his joints ached. And while the pain in his head was abating, it maintained a slow, steady beat. His determination to get to the truth was as strong as ever. But the fog rising in his brain from pushing his physical limits was slowing him down a step. I asked crazy old John about the monsters, Rougarous, werewolves, curses, and the twisted kind of karma some folks believed went along with them were all nonsense. And that was not what troubled him. What really ate at him was the voice far back in his mind that kept whispering, "But what if they're not?" He knew from experience there were things out there that should not be there, but they were. He had seen one of them in the jungle, and once was enough. He shook his head to chase the memory away. This was different. He kept telling himself that this was not like Nam. This was something real that killed people and left more evidence than footprints. This was getting him nowhere. He closed the book and grabbed his hat and headed for work. "Afternoon, Sheriff," Freddie said with a laugh as Landry came through the door. Landry gave the dispatcher a single-finger salute and scowl in return. He glanced up at the clock. "It's 9:30, he confirmed. "Coroner's final Delmer is on your desk," Freddie said. "Doc said the reporters are sniffing around crying about freedom of information papers and he couldn't hold it any longer." "Well, hell, a happy day," Landry growled. Fresh coffee in hand, he sat at his desk and retrieved a silver flask from the drawer by his right knee. He poured a shot of Jameson's into the coffee, sipped, and picked up the coroner's report on Delbert Rousseau. His eye scanned the usual broad strokes. No surprises, and nothing Landry didn't know on his own. Time of death, between 0330 and 0500. Okay. Immediate cause of death, exsanguination related to decapitation. No shit. Coroner's verdict, homicide. You think? Tell me something I don't know. Landry threw the report down onto his desk, and with a sigh, he let his chin drop down onto his desk and closed his eyes. A phrase jumped from the report. He opened his eyes and grabbed the report, and there it was at the top of the external exam. Irregular tearing wounds to anterior neck from undetermined weapon, possible animal origin. And so Doc Johnson thought it looked like an animal too. Interesting. But not a lot of help, unless they could find the manufactured teeth and claws he knew had to be out there. No, the key was in how these wounds were linked together, and with whom. That fourth link in the chain would be their killer. Landry hit the intercom button. "Freddy," he said, "what time is Jerry due in today?"
Not until 3.
"Okay, call him in about 1. Tell him to come. I'm not getting any rest, so why the hell should he? If you need me, I'll be at the library."
What's with the sudden interest in reading, boss?
Freddy joked as he passed. "You should try it," Landry said over his shoulder. Landry didn't hold out much hope for his quest, but that was no reason not to pursue it. The truth is out there. Isn't that what the television show said? Maybe he'd stumble over it as he looked around enough. Besides, there were worse things to look at than Christie Dulac. "Morning, Miss Dulac." He touched a finger to the brim of his hat before slipping it off. "I brought your book back." "Already?" She left her cart. "Did you find what you wanted?" "Not yet. That's why I'm here. You keep copy of old newspaper articles, right? What do they call that? Microfiche?" And she laughed softly and shook her head. "Not anymore," she said, and saw a shadow of disappointment cross his face. "That is, yes, we do, but it's all on computer now." "I hate computers." "I guess that when you came looking for a book rather than just Google what you were looking for. Surely, though, you have deputies to do the research for you." "I guess so," he said. "I hate to contribute to their delinquency. That and, well, a book got me dinner with a pretty lady. I bet Google can do that." "You'd be surprised," she said with a smile. "Just what are you looking for, Sheriff?" "Something that ties my 3 victims together. There are some details of the crimes that I can't share, but this smacks of revenge. Somewhere these people cross paths with my killer in a way that planted the seed of murder." Christie pulled her still-loaded cart behind the counter and waved him over to her desk. She sat down at the computer and brought the screen to life. "Pull that chair over here," she told him. "Oh, come on. You have to get closer than that." Close enough to see the screen brought him close enough to smell scented soap and perfume. He could feel sweat running down his back and sides. He glanced at her from the corner of his eye and quickly looked back to the screen, hoping she hadn't noticed him looking at her. "If we bring up the old news files and search for a story containing all 3 names, we may get a hit." "Okay, here goes." She brought a slender finger down onto the keyboard and the screen changed. He leaned in to see what was happening, brushed her shoulder and jumped away as if he'd bumped into a green briar. "Nothing. Do you know of any places they share or events they might have all attended? Church, maybe?" "No." Landry shook his head. "Delmer was a Catholic. Miss Rita was, some kind of holy roller. I don't know which church. I doubt Jeff Don set foot in a church since his life." "Well, I'll try a few more combinations," she said. "It may take some time. I'm sure you have other things you need to be doing. Let me take a look and I'll get back to you." "Okay, things are pretty hectic," he said. "Just call the office." "I have dinner at the Bayou on Thursday nights." "Tonight is Thursday," he said. "Yes, it is." Her perfume lingered with him the entire drive out of Panther Creek Road, and he was having second thoughts about the wisdom of waving Cletus off casting a print they'd found. That was old bitterness at work. It was also before the idea of disguise or costume occurred to him. He would kick himself later. Right now, he needed to keep from making the same mistake again. The track from his flower bed safely stowed in the trunk of his car, and he hoped the ground at Jeff Don's place would yield another. He bounced into the long drive and parked as near to the road as safe. He crawled from behind the wheel and started a deliberate slow walk towards the house. The gravel in the drive itself would render it useless for his purpose, and he would have to concentrate on one side going in and check the other side on a return trip. The crime scene had yielded a few spots of blood that might have been footprints but were too smeared to be conclusive. They had been photographed, but Landry knew they would be useless in identifying anyone or the artificial print he was hoping to find. He stood at the front door, looking over the surrounding area. They found no evidence of a car. Which way would a killer go on foot? But there was one other route, wasn't there? To the Bayou, he said. He could have a boat. He wondered how far the search went in that direction, and he was willing to bet it hadn't gone far enough. 10 yards from the porch there was a pair of impressions in the dirt. They were large enough for a ball of a human foot, but a big dog or a panther would fit the ball nearly as well. He found the next set at the tree line, still ill-defined and of little help. He looked back at the place of the first prints, gauging the distance to be roughly the same as from them back to the porch, and there were no tracks in between. The picture of the Rougarou flashed in his head, and he jumped. The thought came unbidden. It made sense only until he realized no man in special shoes is going to jump 10 yards at once, but there was a third set 10 yards or so from the water's edge. His breath caught in his throat. There was no mistaking these exact replicas of the one in his yard. Jerry Wills stuck his head in the sheriff's door at about 10 minutes to 1. Landry was sitting at his desk, hands behind his head and boots propped up on one corner. The scowl etched into the face that turned to greet Jerry seemed to call for caution. "Y'all had coffee?" Jerry, partially shielded by the doorframe, asked. "I have." Landry pointed to a chair. "Is it working yet?" Jerry slipped into the seat and held a steaming cup to the sheriff. Landry smiled at the offer and put Jerry at ease, and he put his feet down and leaned over the desk and pointed at the 3 plaster casts on the desk. Jerry opened his mouth to comment. His mouth snapped shut and his brow drew down over his eyes and slowly rose to Landry's face. "Animal attacks?" he finally said. "What?" Landry's unpraised hand stopped him. "Before I get started," Landry said, "I want to point out it was you who brought up the subject of me not neglecting evidence of monsters. And did you hear howling last night?" Jerry shook his head. "I murmured at the cafe about it at lunch. That's all." "I heard it," Landry said. "It was not a dog, and it sure wasn't a wolf. I went looking for whatever was causing it, but the sound stopped as soon as I was out the door. The entire neighborhood was out there looking around, and nobody saw a thing." "Not unusual," Jerry said. "No, you're right there." Landry pushed one of the casts towards Jerry. "I found this outside my living room window. I found these today out on the path connecting to Jeff's house to the bayou." "You're kidding." Jerry studied Landry's face. "You're not kidding, are you? You're serious." "I want you to go tell Frank and Roger Bass I want to see them, and do it in person. Then stop in at John Donne's and do the same. I think I have a way to get them to cooperate a bit more." "How's that?" "I think they really want to tell me what they saw," Landry said. "But they're not as afraid of who or what they saw as much as they are spitting out the words." "I don't get it, Sheriff." You will," Landry told him. "After we're done with them, I'm going to want you to pick up old John and bring him on down here." Landry reached into his pocket for his wallet. He pulled out a bill and thought for a moment and added one more. "Here's some cash, since you will be driving all over the parish rounding up this bunch. Bring us back some shrimp and grits from Fat Louie's." "Fat Louie's, eh? Day's looking up already." "Good, because I want you working days with me until we wrap this up. Frank and Roger Bass are closest, and let's start with them and maybe we won't need John Donne." "By the way, Sheriff," Jerry paused in the doorway and gave him a wink. "Did Detective Ledoux find your place okay and find you last night?" "What? Jazz? No, I haven't seen her since the meeting here. Why would she be at my place?" "Oh, wait. No. Absolutely not." "Well, she came by here last night and asked directions to your house. Said she had something about the case," Jerry said. "Camille told her how to get there." "You mean she never showed up?" "That's exactly what I mean. What time was this?" I don't remember exactly. Kinda late. When Jerry left, he dialed the number for the Morgan City Police Department and asked for Detective Ledoux. A moment later, a man answered. "Sheriff Landry," he said. "This is Captain Ross. I'm Jazz's supervisor. She's not in. If this is about the case, it's been reassigned to Detective Wentmore." "Reassigned?" Landry said. "In the middle of an investigation? What's going on?" "Detective Ledoux said her work was caught up," Ross told him. "She requested emergency leave as far as I know and has left town. Would you like to speak with Detective Wentmore?" "No, thanks, Captain. Not right now." Frank and Roger Bass arrived at the jailhouse as Landry and his deputy were cramming foam takeout boxes in the wastebasket. The visitors turned down an offer of something to drink and Landry led them down to his office. "Frank, Roger, y'all sit down," Landry said, settling in behind the desk. "I'll get right to it. I have been sorely disappointed in the two of you. Y'all have been impending a police investigation. I'm a tad bit more understanding today, but don't y'all try me. I'm going to rephrase the questions I've been asking you to make this a little easier on the two of you. I want straight answers, and I want them today." "Sheriff, you can't make—" "Hold it right there, Frank," Landry interrupted. "If I was out to make Roger talk, he'd be in a cell right now instead of my office. Are we clear?" Frank Bass nodded, but refused to look away. "We are going to talk about this, Frank," Landry insisted. "Just so we're clear on this, I don't give a damn about your superstitions. I have 3 murders to solve." "Don't act like you're so high and mighty, Sheriff," Frank shot back. "You might have been off to the war and to college, but you're back home now. You ain't got no holly of being away." "You're right about that," Landry shot back. "So, you know better than anyone not to try and give me grief." "I'm sorry, Sheriff," Frank said. "Don't be," Landry told him. "I'm going to make this easy. I'm going to talk about something without really saying what we're really talking about. Y'all understand?" "I think so," Roger said. "Frank, how many pebbles y'all have outside your doors right now?" Frank smiled and nodded. 13. "Uh-huh," Landry nodded at him. "Y'all be going to mass regularly?" "Yes, sir, Sheriff." "Since when?" Frank hung his head. "Since Delmer," he mumbled. "Roger," Landry turned to the boy. "You couldn't tell me what the man outside your camp looked like because he didn't look like a man. Am I right?" "Yes, sir." "He looked like a wolf, didn't he?" "His head, yes, sir." "How about his hands and feet?" "His hands," Roger said after some thought. "I couldn't see his feet." "Do y'all think that this might be what old John would call a Rougarou?" "Old John might do that," Frank answered. "Thank you, boys." Landry opened the office door. "Y'all have finally been helpful. If you should happen to see any more unnamed creatures around your place, you give me a call." "Well, I'll be damned," Jerry said when they were gone. "I couldn't sleep, so I did some reading last night and followed up at the library today," Landry told him. "Seems some folks believe in a person talks about a Rougarou in closer than general terms, they believe they will become a Rougarou. And so you let them tell you they saw a Rougarou without really saying it? But what's the deal with church and the pebbles?" "A Rougarou can't pass 12. If you leave 13 objects out your door, the Rougarou will sit there endlessly counting and starting over while you sit safely inside. As for church, well, neglecting Lent and general sinfulness is a kind of invitation for becoming a Rougarou or at least getting a visit." "That kind of questioning will never work in court," Jerry said. "It might if we prove to them it's a man in a costume," Landry said. "It may take away the fear of speaking with the words anyway." "Okay, I'll buy that. Do you still want me to bring in the others?" "Just old John," Landry said. Wait a bit, though. We'll treat old John to dinner and see what he knows. Right now, I couldn't eat another bite. It was early evening, and so Landry opted to take John across the Bayou Cafe. It would be quiet, relaxing, and they served beer. John really needed an invitation to talk, but it couldn't hurt to ease the way.
Here? That's some kind of good right there.
Old John patted his belly and rocked back in his chair. Glad you like it, John, Landry said. Consider it my thanks for helping me solve these murders.
What you mean, Sheriff?
You were right, John. A Rougarou killed those people. Tell me how you know so quick. It was the Rougarou. A smile twinkled in the corner of old John's eyes and crept over his lips. His impish look reminded Landry not to be drawn into the idea that old was the same as stupid. Old John lived through times when it was easy for folks to disappear into the swamp and never to be seen again. Folks around Loquette were a superstitious bunch, and there was no doubt in that, but their beliefs didn't just appear out of the mist. There was a kernel of truth in every legend.
Your roots are showing, Sheriff, John said. This bayou got all kinds of secrets. Some of them get up and prowl around at night. Oh, John, he don't see good, but he sees clear. I gotta say you're seeing it getting better.
You seen the Rougarou?
Now that you're seeing so good, John ignored the question. You ever wonder where this Rougarou come from? Y'all know where he come from, maybe? You'll find where he go.
Do you know where he came from, John? Jerry asked. I think old John is shining on us, Jerry, Landry said. Rougarous don't come from anywhere, do they, John? But he just said, Jerry began. Landry shared old John's mischievous smile, leaving Jerry feeling like the butt of a secret joke. He shifted his gaze between the two. Rougarous are made, Jerry, Landry said at last. This thing didn't just wander into town one day. It was made here from materials already on hand. Ain't that right, John?
How'd you get so smart, little Ed Landry?
That was Sherlock. His doing. Landry pointed at his deputy. Me? Jerry said. How'd I do that? When you have eliminated the impossible, whatever remains, however improbable, must be the truth. And that's what the real Holmes would say, Landry explained. I'm not willing to eliminate the Rougarou as impossible just yet. Monster or no monster, we still need to connect the dots. Who wanted Delmer, Jeff and Rita dead, and was willing to sell his soul to see it happen?
Maybe, Sheriff. Only maybe, John said. There ain't nothing certain about a Rougarou, even where his soul gonna be.
Tell it plain, John, Landry said.
Not every Rougarou is the old devil getting his due, John said. Maybe this here Rougarou chasing down his own devils.
Or maybe we have an old man blowing smoke up our ass, Jerry said.
That may be too, John replied. How y'all gonna know?
Bayou Moon. Chapter 6. Let's get straight into that.
How y'all gonna know?
The question haunted Landry, and it pissed him off. Christie arrived at the bayou about the time John's taunting query dug its claws into his brain. Despite events, a pleasant anticipation of another dinner with her had followed him throughout the day. Now that he realized his hopes, John's question hitched a ride on his conscience. He left John after securing Jerry's promise to see the old man home. He paid the check for the two of them and went to meet Christie near the door. Just wrapping up the day, he said with a nod towards the curious, beaming twosome sitting at the counter. Oh, she said. I'd love to have listened in on that conversation. Did you learn anything from John? He took her by the elbow and gently steered her to the corner booth they occupied their last meeting. She smiled up at him as she slid into the seat. Landry sat opposite her, his back to the wall. I learned. He picked up the thread again. That old man is the most elusive old pain in the ass. Pardon me. Old cuss I have ever known. I wish I had taken time to know him better, years ago. He does have that effect, Christie said with a laugh. You know him? Landry asked. Not really, she replied. I don't think anybody really does. There's sort of a tragic air about him that keeps people distant. Is that what it is? I thought it was that he sees too much. Ed, you amaze me. You're the sheriff, and it shouldn't surprise me that you notice people and things about them. But that you pick up on something like that was not something I expected. I have my moments. He gave her a shy smile. For a man. She cocked her head and gave him a quizzical look that melted into a smile. You're baiting me, Ed Landry, she accused. And just what is it you're fishing for? Why, how do you think? Of course, he told her, and then changed the subject. John's dying, you know. He has cancer. Oh, God, I didn't know. Poor man, he's all alone. I don't think anyone does. Why, he told me God only knows. I don't think he wants people to pity him or change how they act around him. His secret's safe with me. You seem distracted, Christie said, as dinner drew to a close. Is it the case? Huh? Yes, he said. John said something tonight that's nagging at me. I don't know why, but it'll come clear eventually. I hope. Does this happen often? No, that's what bothers me. When this does happen, it is usually meaning that I'm ignoring something that I shouldn't. Then you should give it your full attention, she said with a smile. I'm guessing you're not leaving town soon. We can do this when the case is over. Oh, I didn't mean... No, it's okay, she said. You have a job to do, and right now it's taking everything you have, and that's as it should be. I'm not letting you off the hook for a dinner date down the road. I'm just giving you time to get ready for it. If you want to, that is. I want that very much, he said. I promise, I'm more fun than this. I'm going to hold you to that, and those words, mister. Walk me out? She slipped her arm through his as they headed for the door. Landry felt the heat rise in his face. Only Maury and another couple lingering over dinner saw the rosy blush he wore. Old John's words continued to play repeatedly in his head. Every path his mind started down ended with, "How y'all gonna know?" Did John know something about the Rougarou he wanted Landry to know, but was unable to say straight? It sure as hell wasn't that he was afraid to say the word like Frank Bass. He knew the murders weren't random. Locate was a small town. Lives and histories tended to get hopelessly intertwined, going back generations. The connections between any two people were numerous as strands on a spider's web, and just as sticky. Somehow, these three people's lives intersected with each other and the killer. How y'all gonna know? Rita would know the answer. Unfortunately, Rita was dead. Her loose tongue was almost likely the cause. Was it simply because she knew too much and couldn't keep her mouth shut, or was there more to it than that? What of Jerry's idea that Jeff was in on a double cross? Jeff might have had something shady to hide that Rita latched onto. Jeff had been involved in his share of trouble, that was for certain. But he didn't kill Rita. He was already dead, and... what about Delmer? He didn't fit anywhere. Except for his job at the diner. Delmer was damn near a recluse. He wasn't involved in anything more dangerous than WWE and the Saints on television. He was a bland, obscure figure in Landry's youth, inseparable from their later version the sheriff saw almost every morning, whistling and making bayonets. Maybe it was time to squeeze Jeff's brother, John, a little tighter about what Jeff was up to and with whom. But that was for tomorrow. He had to get some sleep. That's what he kept telling himself. If only his mind would let him. Landry might have been surprised at the sudden cooperation had he not fallen to sleep the moment his head hit the pillow. He awakened the next morning feeling renewed. The dreamless sleep was a mercy for which he was extremely grateful. Standing beneath the soothing warmth and steam of the shower, he knew how he was gonna know. John was telling him that he was on the right track. He would know when he'd found the reason the Rougarou sought revenge. And that didn't advance his knowledge on the identity of the Rougarou, but it let him know to concentrate on that angle. On his way out the door, he remembered the book he had Freddie order for him. He stopped at his mailbox and pulled a brown package, along with a wild jumble of envelopes, from his throat. When had he checked his mail last? He shrugged at the internal question and continued down the walk to his car. "Sheriff Landry," a voice caught him on the open car door. "Can I talk to you? Just take a minute." "Miss Clara," he said. "I always have time for my favourite neighbour. What can I do for you, dear?" And Clara Effin Well, a retired history teacher, was Landry's 80-year-old neighbour and biggest fan, and she was forever stamped on his memory. Miss Clara loved to challenge high school freshmen with the offer of forsaking their homework for the entire year in favour of taking their grades strictly from her notoriously difficult tests. In 30 years of teaching, only one student ever took her up on that offer, Ed Landry. And from the day he walked up to her after class to accept her challenge to this day, they held a mutual admiration for one another. Miss Clara attended LSU, and so when the time came for Ed Landry to choose a college, he couldn't think of none better. "Oh, Sheriff," she said as she fluttered up to him. "You, Miss Clara, can still call me Eddie," he told her. "Now, you know that's not so," she scolded. "There's something I wish to say to you, and I hope you won't think of me as a silly old woman. And before you say it's not so, hear me out. As a teacher, I had to keep certain things to myself. It just wouldn't do back in my day for the school board to hear one of the teachers was, well, different." "I don't understand, Miss Clara." "Of course you don't. I haven't told you yet, Sheriff. Your old teacher is what they call nowadays an empath. I feel things from people, what they feel or think. Oh, it doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. I have to tell you to be careful, dear. This is not over. There's a cold hunger out there, and it's bent on blood. There, I said it." "Miss Clara?" He put an arm around her trembling shoulder. "Thank you. I think you are right, and I will be careful, I promise. Now, you go on home and stay safe, and leave the worry to me. I will watch out for you." "Oh, Sheriff." She burst into tears and buried her face against him. "You're the only one who would understand." Landry hid the tears that crowded the corners of his eyes from her until he was in the car and backing out of his driveway. Only then did he brush them away. He was no longer hungry. Landry pulled into his parking spot 5 minutes later. He grabbed the package from the seat beside him and entered the building through the back door. He dropped down at his desk and pulled the package to him. Fallon Jackson's Myths and Monsters of North America fell from the package. He stacked at the top of Myths and Monsters on the Bayou. The review said this person was an expert on the subject of cryptids, animals said to exist but never proven to exist. What did she know that this killer didn't, and that would give him away? Before he could find out, Jerry Wills knocked on his door. Dating a librarian and ordering books too," he said with a chuckle. "I'm not dating a librarian," Landry protested. "Not yet, anyway. Did you get anything more out of old John?" "Nothing that made sense, but I think the old man knows something he's not telling. Something real." "I get that too," Landry said. "But why is he being so cryptic about it? Do you think he's shining the sun? Is he protecting someone?" "Who has John got to protect? He's got no family and he's all alone." "Don't hold back on me, boss," Jerry said. "He's what?" "He's got cancer," Landry said. Wow, you wouldn't think that to look at him, but then you wouldn't expect however the hell old he is, old man to come out of Lilith Dupree's trailer at midnight either. What? I followed him last night after I dropped him off, Jerry said, matter-of-factly. Just a hunch, to see what's up. He left his house and walked half a mile up the road to Lilith's place, and stayed there almost 2 hours. Now what the hell was that all about? Well... No way, Landry said with a shake of his head. He's over 90. You tell me then, Jerry replied. Okay, Landry surrendered. This is your lead. You go interview Lilith. Landry spent the rest of the day clearing reports and a week's backlog of paperwork from his desk. He broke the drudgery with a couple of chapters of Myths and Monsters of North America. He considered calling Christie, but recalling Miss Clara's warning, decided to call it a day. He tucked the book under his arm, grabbed his hat and decided on one more stop before heading home. Freddie, I'm heading out, he told the dispatcher as he passed. I'm going to see John Doe, and then home. Sure thing, Sheriff, Freddie said. Oh, and for God's sake, get some sleep tonight, so we can stop tiptoeing around here. Landry waved one finger answer over his head as he went out the door, and he tossed the book on the passenger seat and climbed into his cruiser. John Donnie was not likely to be home at this hour. Landry turned down Pine Street and drove to the fishing hole, the favourite watering spot of the younger crowd. John's pickup was nowhere to be seen. He decided on one last try. Landry swung his cruiser around and pointed it in the direction of the Donnie homestead. His luck was better there. John's pickup was nosed into the driveway and a dozen others lined the streets outside Robert Donnie's house. Landry pulled the Crown Vic in behind John's truck. Robert, John's father, met Landry at the door and pushed the screen open and waved him inside. Beer was flowing freely around the room, but no one was smiling. And though his truck was outside, Landry did not see John among the Donnie clan gathered in the living room. How's your father doing? Landry asked. He's about the same, Robert answered. He's in a nursing home up Morgan City. On some of his good days, he knows me. I'm sorry to hear that, Landry said. I didn't know. He's a good man, though. Always was a great sheriff. Betty doing okay? She's holding up. As well as it can be expected, I suppose, Robert said. Anything yet on who killed my boy? Not yet, Landry said. I got everybody in the department on this. Something has to come up soon. I'd like to talk to John about it, if there's some place we can. Sure, Sheriff, Robert replied. First bedroom on the right through the door. Go on in. I'll get John and I'll send him on in. Thanks, Robert, Landry told him. I'm very sorry for your loss. I appreciate it, Ed. Landry walked down a short hall, and the walls clung with family pictures and memories of happier times. He paused in the bedroom doorway and looked around the room. It was not very different from the room he'd shared with his brother 20-some years ago. There were a few more electronic gadgets, but overall, the look had not changed much. A pair of matching nightstands were crowded into the space between the twin beds that lined the opposing walls. A bit of stored memory reminded him that John and Jeff Donnie were paternal twins. He was surprised to learn that despite their similarity in appearance, they were very different. The wall above each of the beds told the story of just how different. The wall to his left was covered with posters of scantily clad supermodels and football stars. On the other side of the room were banners calling for protection of the rainforest and saving whales. An old baseball bat, the barrel run through a pair of gloves, and a pair of old fishing poles leaned in the far corner. This side was mine, John said, pointing to the rainforest side. Go on in and have a seat, Sheriff. The two men sat side by side on John's bed, looking across the room at the emptiness behind all the memories opposite them. We haven't lived here for a couple of years, John said. Jeff moved out first. He went to Tulane for a semester before deciding college wasn't for him. I think maybe the world out there was bigger than he expected. Yeah, could be, Landry said. A man can get lost out there in more ways than one. I still expect him to walk in any minute and flop down over there. It's hard to believe he's gone. What happened, Sheriff? Dad's not talking about it, but I can tell it's bad from the look on his face. I can't say just yet, John. Not with the investigation still going on. After it's over, if your dad won't tell you and you still feel like you have to know, come and see me. Thanks, Sheriff. Dad said he was going to turn this room into his man cave. He never got around to it. I wonder now if he ever will. Yeah, that's got to be tough on him, Landry said. A man doesn't expect his son to die before him. Not that it's easier for brothers, mind you. Just different. You're a tough guy, John. I lost a lot of guys that felt like brothers, and I know it's not the same, but I can tell for you, it will get better. It never goes away, but it gets better. Landry watched John's face as it slowly crumpled, and tears were right behind. John buried his face in his hands and let the sorrow flow. Landry pulled the door closed so the others would not hear John cry. He sat down next to John and put an arm around the boy's shoulders. And when his sobs faded and the tears dried, he wiped his face on an old shirt left in the dresser drawer. I'm sorry, Sheriff, he said. Don't worry, son, Landry said. A man need not fear tears. It's the man who has none is the lesser soul. I still wake up at night and remember the guys who died beside me. It never fails to bring tears to my eyes. Thanks, John said. I'm okay now. What did you come to ask me? We talked about it before, Landry said. But I need you to think back. Who would want to hurt Jeff? And did anyone think he might have betrayed their trust? Not that I know, Sheriff, John said with a shake of his head. We didn't tell you before, but we've been running a little shine. Nothing serious, nobody complained. We were just carrying it and we didn't sell any. Nothing to get hurt over, though Dad would take it hard if he found out. I guess it really doesn't matter now, so I might as well tell you. I probably know the answer to this question, but I want to hear the name from you to be sure. Who were the two you working for? Landry asked. They'll never hear it from me, and they'll never be called into court about it. You have my word on that. It was Al Blackman, John said. We were cool with Al, though. He wouldn't do something like this. I don't think he would either. However, at this point, I'm not discounting anybody, Landry said. Somebody had it in for Jeff, and that's for sure. I can tell this wasn't some random killing. It was intentional. Jeff was a target. I can't tell you why. I think so, but the double cross looks like the motive behind it. If you're still working with Al Blackman, you better grow a pair of eyes in the back of your head. Whoever you boys and Roger saw out there on the bayou that night is still out there. You need to think hard about that, you and Roger both. I'd stick real close to home right now. It might not be a bad idea to move back in here. That's been on my mind, Sheriff. All of it, honestly. I don't know who it was out there. I don't even know for sure that it was a person. So, you're staying with your buddy and saying it was a monster? That's weak, John. I know how it sounds, John said. It sounds crazy, but I swear, what I saw that night had some body of a man, but the face was not human. You gotta believe me, Sheriff. It wasn't human. And so what was it? Landry pressed him. Bigfoot? Dogman? Rougarou? What? I don't know, okay? Roger and his uncle say it's a... Well, you know what Roger says. Roger doesn't say, Landry told him. You're not going to man up and say the word either, are you? No, sir. Okay, Landry sighed. I've tried my best. Have you told this to your daddy? Maybe he can talk some sense into you. I didn't have to tell him, John said. Check out the wall behind his chair when you go. Okay, Fair enough. I've done my part. You be careful now, you hear? You don't need to get up and I'll show myself out. You think about what I said and then you think some more. Landry gave John's family a friendly smile and a wave as he passed through their living room. And sure enough, propped behind Robert's chair was an old double-barrel 12-gauge shotgun. Landry pushed open the screen and strolled across the porch and back to his car. On the drive home, Landry decided two things. He was finally hungry, and he had no desire to cook. He swung the black and gold car into the empty space in front of his office and walked across the street to the Bayou Cafe. The lingering aroma of fries settled him on a menu choice before he reached a seat at the counter. Overhead, Buckwheat Zydeco was singing about his yaya. A couple in the corner had a booth, and a familiar figure at the counter were the only customers. Landry settled in next to the man at the counter. "Well, John," Landry said, "how are y'all?" Old John slowly shook his head before turning his face to Landry. A sly smile spread across the old man's lips, slowly lifting the corners of his grey moustache.
"Sheriff, I've known you since you was that little Eddie Landry running all over this town."
John's smile blossomed.
"You don't have to shine on me like that. You can use them college words all right with me."
"John, you are a natural wonder," Landry said.
"While you live as long as me, you'll be wondering too."
"What'll it be, Sheriff?" Maury asked from the other side of the counter. "Poutine and a couple of those pulled pork sliders of yours," Landry said. "Hungry, John?"
"You taking up a habit of feeding me?"
John asked.
"Feel free. Old John will right with that. You're too late tonight, but I'm still a bit parched."
"Whatever he's drinking," Landry told Maury. "John, you're the sort of self-appointed expert on the Rougarou. What happens now?"
"What? You about to believe old John? Oh, he's gonna kill again. You can take that to the bank, my friend."
"That's what I hear. Tell me, do you think these killings are a random rampage of your Rougarou?" Landry asked. "You know, does a Rougarou plan? Because I don't think it was a random attack at all. I think this is all connected. Can your Rougarou do that?"
"Eddie, you're the smartest sheriff this town has ever had."
"Is that a yes?" John's beer and Landry's food arrived to preempt the old man's answer. Landry savoured the delicious goodness of potatoes, gravy and cheese, chasing it with big bites of spicy pulled pork, while John studied his beer and Bao Jock sang, "Don't Tell Your Mama," through the speakers above them. Landry wiped the last bit of gravy from his lips and sipped his coffee, and returned his attention to his companion, and John refreshed his possum-like smile.
"You're not gonna catch this Rougarou," John began. "Not by chasing after him. You're gonna have to get in front of him. Yeah, this Rougarou, he thinks. You gotta outthink him."
"If only I thought like a Rougarou instead of a man," Landry told him.
"Sheriff, now you make me sad."
"What?"
"This here Rougarou is a man," John said. "I thought you knew that. Don't that gut of yours talk to you?"
Bayou Moon. Chapter 7. Let's get straight into that. Landry laid the book on his lap, rubbed the bridge of his nose between the forefinger and thumb of his right hand, and reached for the beer on the table beside him with the left. Fallon Jackson's discourse on the Rougarou was interesting. It simply wasn't helping much with the problem at hand. And this whole idea of the Rougarou overflowed with ambiguity. It could be this, it could be that. He was finding nearly every parish had its own version, and he hadn't even made it to the section on the Native American versions. And before he left the cafe, John had suggested his gut might have more expertise than textbooks. He was beginning to think the old man might have something there. Experience trumps theory. The maxim had served him well enough in the jungle and on the street. And what was his gut saying? He leaned back, closed his eyes, and relaxed. "The better to hear you with, my dear," he thought. It turned out his gut had a lot to say, and some of it he'd already heard in natural course of investigation. However, the most instructive bit of information was resurrected from his almost forgotten past. A voice floated up from the well of his subconscious to demand a hearing. It was the voice of Preston Frank, his camp counselor from that last summer he went to church camp. For he taught them as one having authority, and not as the scribes. The recollection slowly evolving from an idea to a new role as an epiphany. Mr. Frank's point so long ago was that Christ spoke without equivocation because he spoke what he knew as fact, gleaned from experience and position, rather than theory and untested faith. He knew what he was talking about because he'd been there. That might not be the perfect remembrance of the theology, but it was close enough for a parish sheriff. He didn't yet know, but that little born mott was the key to open this mystery.
"How you're gonna know?"
Landry thought the answer was within reach. His phone rang and he reached to answer it instead. He looked at the number. It was not one that he recognized. "Hello," he said.
"Sheriff?"
It was Jazz, her voice filled with panic.
"It's real, Sheriff. The Rougarou. It's real. I saw it outside your house. It chased my car down the street."
"Jazz, are you?"
"I gotta go. For God's sakes, be careful."
The dial tone buzzed in his ear, and she was gone. In his head, he made the connection of squealing tires and howls, but the terror in her voice didn't connect well with the confident woman he knew. Right behind that connection came another. Landry jumped from his chair and pulled his boots on.
"No rest for the wicked,"
his gut whispered as he headed for the door. Landry backed his cruiser into a stand of basket oaks on Bayou Road and was swallowed by the dark shadow of the big trees. He powered down his window and switched off the engine. He was playing the hunch provided by his gut. If his gut was wrong about this, he planned to kick its ass. Across the road from his dark refuge, a rundown, whitewashed clapboard house reflected the silvery moonlight. In the drive was parked the pickup truck he'd searched for earlier. Evidently, John Donnie no longer felt the need of protection offered by his father's shotgun and decided to go home. Landry had tried to give the kid some advice that might save his life. He had, obviously, not taken it. And what was new about that? Damn kids went out their way to ignore advice. Ignore the sheriff was the parish motto. So be it. If the ignorance of others would not cause Ed Landry to relax his hold on duty, if Jed had double-crossed the killer, chances were slim to none and John was innocent of the double dealing. They weren't that different. They were a set, not a match set, but a set nevertheless. Miss Clara warned the killing would continue, and Jod said the same. In Landry's mind, if that were true, John Donnie rose to the top of the killer's list. Now the moon was rising at Landry's back, and the shadow of the oaks would give him a few hours of cover. His view of the house across the way, washed in the pale light, filled him with a mix of dread and hope. Hope that he was on a fool's errand, and dread that he wasn't. Landry watched, waited and prayed for a breeze to relieve the still heat that wrapped him up in its humid embrace. Sweat stung his eyes and rolled down his back to pool at his butt crack. As he was about to give up, his long suffering was rewarded. A twig snapped to his left. The sound was followed closely by the rustling of footsteps and the carpets of leaves. Landry eased his head to the left, and the trees bunched up against the road for a mile in that direction. If someone was moving out there, they would have stepped out onto the road to be visible from his position. That suited Landry's purpose just fine. Anything that didn't move across the road towards the house was of little interest. As he watched the tree line A silver-washed figure crept forward to crouch beneath an oak on the narrow shoulder of the road. The head was lost in shadow, but there was no question it was a man. A silhouette obscured by patches of shadow, his movement was clear enough. He was definitely holding to the shadows. The visible profile remained fixed on John's place. There seemed to be no question about the intent. Landry eased his hand down to his side to unsnap the guard on his weapon. The snap sounded like thunder, and Landry winced and slowly raised his hand to the door handle. The figure had not moved. He applied steady upward pressure onto the latch, and when it moved, he would be ready. The figure rose from its crouch, left the cover of the oak tree, and stepped into the road. Moonlight transformed the silhouette into a ghostly figure. The long snout and pointed ears covered with wild tufts of dark fur were unmistakable in the light. And Landry drew a sharp, quick breath. "Jesus," Landry whispered as he exhaled. His trembling hand locked onto the door handle. Wait, not yet. He watched, stunned, not believing what he was seeing, unable to look away. His mind flashed to the image of a huge brown shadow crashing through the jungle undergrowth. He snapped his eyes closed in an off-practice blink to chase the mental image away. Beyond his window, the thing in the road, the Rougarou his mind tried to deny, trotted across the far side. And then, dropping onto all fours, it began to pace back and forth at the edge of the yard, sizing the place up, Landry thought. He shifted his leg closer to the door, braced his right against the console, and yanked up on the door handle. The creature broke into a run, jumped the fence and crashed through the large living room window in the time it took Landry to get out of his car. Landry drew his weapon and called for backup, and he charged into the road and was met with screams. Landry kicked down the rickety gate, and he took steps to the door without slowing, lowered his shoulder and hit the door on the run. The blow splintered the frame and slamming the door into the wall behind it. John lay sprawled on the living room floor in a spreading pool of red. The back door exploded. A glance at the body told Landry there was no help to give. Slowing but a step, he leapt over John, threw a chair from his path and burst through the empty hinges of the back door. He jumped 3 steps onto a concrete patio and sprinted into the knee-high grass and weeds that led away a wall of trees. By the time he reached the trees, he decided against pursuing the thing in the dark without more moonlight and without backup. Holding his weapon ready, Landry backpedaled through the overgrown yard to John's back door. He heard the sirens as he mounted the steps at the rear of the house and holstered his weapon. He knew it was useless, but he went in to see John. Head down, he was walking through the cluttered kitchen when he heard a tortured moan. John was still alive. Landry dropped down at John's side. His left arm was as useless as a bloody rag splayed out at his side, and with his right hand, John fumbled in a partially successful attempt to hold his intestines inside his body. "Hang on, John," Landry told him, and he keyed his mic. "Landry, get me a damned ambulance out here now!" He didn't wait to hear the response. Lights flashed red and blue through the front door, and Landry ignored them too. He wet a towel in the kitchen sink and hustled back to John's side. Gently cradling the coils of intestines in the towel, he stuffed John's guts back inside and wrapped the towel around the middle of the wounded man. "Ambulance is on the way," Landry assured him. "Sheriff?" Jess called from the steps. "Clear, Jess," he yelled back. "Is that ambulance coming?" And Jessie Pennetu bounded up the stairs into the house, weapon still drawn, and she quickly took in the scene and holstered her weapon and moved over to Landry. "It's on the way, Sheriff," she told him. "My God, is that John?" "Yes," Landry said. "Go see if you can find a clean sheet, but don't be picky and a dirty one will do just fine. Go." Jessie disappeared down a nearby hall and reappeared 2 minutes later with a sheet. "I tear it in half and wet both halves," Landry instructed. The wail of approaching sirens helped both of them breathe easier, and they laid the damp clothes over the wounded arm and abdomen. Minutes later, The room was awash with red and blue lights, and Landry left John and rushed to the open doorway. "In here!" He waved the medics on. One paramedic poured bottles of saline over John's open abdomen and covered the wounds with clean bandages, while the other checked pulse and pressure. "What happened?" one of the paramedics asked as he tucked a rolled blanket under John's feet. "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," Landry said. A pair of IVs going wide open, they bundled John into the back of their ambulance and threw gravel in their wake. The ambulance dodged an arriving police cruiser and rocketed down the road, and Jerry Will's car rocked to a stop in the yard. Landry left the porch and walked over to lean against Jerry's car. "Who's in town?" Landry asked. "Matt, why?" "Get him on the phone. Have him drive out to Bayou Road and do a drive-by of a Frank's fish camp. If there's lights on, ask him to go see that everyone's okay." "Something up over there?" Jerry asked. "I hope not," Landry said. "I hope no one's there, but I just got a real bad feeling. Have him check it out." 20 minutes later, Landry's phone rang. "Sheriff," Matt's voice sounded hollow and far away. "I need you." "Tell me, Matt." "The place is a wreck," he said. "There's blood everywhere, but there's nobody here. It's creepy. The place is torn to hell." "I'm on my way," Landry said and hung up. "Jesse, you got this?" Landry shouted to his deputy. "Jerry, let's go." Landry jumped into his cruiser and slammed the accelerator to the floor, and the big car fish-tailed onto the road, and he steered with it but didn't lift his foot. Time slowed in a dreamlike fashion. The faster he drove, the harder he pushed, the further the road stretched out before him. Landry realized the insensible words he was muttering were not curses, but a prayer. He need not have hurried. He knew it, but did it anyway. That's the way things were going tonight. He followed the long driveway and parked behind Matt's cruiser, and Jerry pulled around Landry and parked in the grass behind the drive. The crumpled remains of a screen door lay in the middle of the yard about 20 yards from where it belonged. Matt Fontaine stood on the small front porch under the soft yellow glow of an overhead light, and he wandered over to Landry's direction. "You okay?" Landry asked. "Yeah." Matt tilted his head towards the house. "Come, take a look." The inner door had been ripped from its hinges and now lay in the centre of the living room. Next to it was a 9mm Glock, a pool of dried blood, and a scattering of spent brass. The furniture was scattered around the room, and few pieces were embedded into the wall several feet off the floor. Jerry stopped to examine the bullet holes in the walls beside where the door had once hung. "Jesus, boss," he said. "Looks like a war zone." "Where is everybody?" Landry asked. "Have you checked the house?" "No one's here," Matt reported. "I'd say no one was home, except—" He nodded at a weapon on the floor. "There's no body anywhere?" And Matt shook his head. "Gone." "Gone?" "There's some blood on the back door," Matt said, "but nobody that I could find." "What do you make of all this?" Jerry swept his hand around the room. Landry shook his head and he took in the destruction. The furniture had been ripped to shreds before being thrown around the room. The floor was littered with shattered glass and pieces of broken picture frames. A torn rug protruded through a window, and bloody claw marks ran in long, deep gouges along the walls. Landry shrugged and followed Jerry through the house, past the blood-streaked rear door and into the backyard. The deputy pointed to a pair of shallow ruts cutting through the trees. "Frank Bass has a fire pit and a boat down that way," Landry said. "Let's check it out." "These boys screwed over the wrong person," Jerry said. Landry, Matt and Jerry started down the trail towards the camp and the swamp beyond. "I drug him off to the swamp," and Jerry pointed out blood on the grass as they passed by. "Oh, holy shit! What's that?" Matt groaned as the trees parted into a wide clearing.
The disemboweled body of Frank Bass hung upside down from a low branch at the edge of the bayou. Beneath his head atop a pile of intestines was Frank's heart. On the muddy bank a few steps away was a set of familiar paw prints with long claws. "Alright, go on back, Matt," Landry said. "Point the way for the crew and get the coroner out here." "You're gonna stay with that?" He pointed at the body. "Yeah." Landry jerked his head back towards the trail. "Go on, get going. We'll be fine. Jerry, I need to talk to you." Wow, 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 wow. And another one. Wow. Absolutely chest-pounding, spine-tingling, chilling stuff there from the incredibly talented Jack LaFountain. Thank you ever so much, brother. What an incredible story you've written here. I'm extremely honoured to narrate your work on the show.
Over on the link in the description box on Amazon's bookstore for release on the 5th of July, but you can pre-order now using the link below in the description box. As ever, you know the drill. Please do let us know. Please do let us know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag TeamFEAR. Got a few big announcements coming out, guys. Some of you may be aware of what's going on outside the scene of the channel in the background. Some things that are just out of my control. So I would advise any of you that are trying to keep up to date with what's going on with the channel and certain stories and series to obviously keep my notifications on full. And over the next few hours, as I will be making a big announcement on the community post in regards to certain content and certain writers on this channel. Anyway, that's it from me today. As ever, I hope you're all well and happy. Friends and family are safe and well. Keeping fit, keeping positive and focused. And of course, as always, remember, be safe, not sorry.